Well, thanks everyone for attending. We're recording tonight's conversation so that for those that weren't able to attend, um, they can access it later. But I want to thank everybody for chiming in and listening into our conversation tonight. It's we've got a great crowd here, and so thank you once again for taking time. Of course, here at the Hurricane Tour, we have a lot of parents and coaches that come to us with questions about the mental game, and in most cases, it's for their juniors, but many times it's for themselves as well. And if you watch golf on TV, it seems like we're hearing more and more pros talking about the importance of the mental game and how important it's become in their game. And so I think the problem though is that most parents aren't sure how to work on it. Which is why we wanted to spend some time on this topic so that parents of junior golfers can learn from these experts and apply these steps to their real life situations. And tonight, I'm joined by a very, very special guest. I believe everyone that's here tonight listening into our conversation is going to leave with some invaluable information and really, even more so than that, actionable steps and solutions that they can take for improving their mental game. Um, Dr. Greg Steinberg, of course, is our guest tonight, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Greg, he's got quite the pedigree. He's a professor of human performance at Austin Peay State University near Nashville. Golf Digest ranked him one of the world's greatest sports psychologists. He has been a mental coach for many PGA and LPGA players, including FedEx champion Brett Snedeker. And he's authored 4 books, including a book called The Mental Rules for Golf, which I've read, which is excellent. And he's a huge supporter of junior golf. So, Dr. Greg, welcome, and thanks for taking time to visit with me and educate our audience.
Well, Rex, it's definitely an honor and a privilege to speak to the Hurricane Tour members tonight about the mental game. And let me just start by, a lot of people ask me as a sports psychologist, golf psychologist, what differentiates, the good juniors from the college players, and what differentiates the college players from the PGA players. And the best way to say it is everybody has talent. I have talent, Rex has talent, everybody has talent. But in a lot of cases, people have emotions and thoughts which push those talents down. So they can never realize their full potential. And other players with maybe the same amount of talent have the right thoughts and the right emotions, which push those talents up so they can raise their game under pressure. And Rex did mention this, but I'm a professor of sports psychology, and I've been teaching for 28 years. And I always do this in my class, and it's just a great visual about what it is about the mental game. And the first question is, if I squeeze this orange, what comes out? Orange juice, right? Always orange juice, not pineapple juice, but always orange juice, right? Second question, why? Why does orange juice come out? Because that is what's inside. Third question, what have you put inside? If you put in fear and negativity and doubt, that's what comes out when you get squeezed. Because we all get squeezed on the golf course. We all get squeezed in the classroom. We all get squeezed in life. But the great ones, the ones that have achieved their potential, they put in joy and peace of mind and compassion and purpose and pride. And so when they get squeezed, that's the right juice that comes out, and they can raise their game. And it's always my goal as a sports psychologist to help you put in the right juice. And it's our goal tonight to show you how to put in the right juice so that you can raise your game under pressure, because that's the goal, right? We love to practice, I hope. We love to compete, but the ultimate goal is for us to play our best under pressure, right? Whether it's in competition on the Hurricane Junior Tour, or whether it's our friends, wherever it is. I mean, the ultimate goal is to play our best under pressure. And so it's our goal to share with you how to do that tonight.
Fantastic. Great analogy. Very, very interesting. Dr. Dr. Greg, for those of our people here tonight in our audience that may not be too familiar with you, talk a little bit about how you got your start, and when did you figure out that you could help golfers specifically? I know you and I have talked a lot about golf, and we both love the sport, and we try to get out there. But when did you figure out that you could actually apply what you've learned and help golfers specifically?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that principle because what we're talking about tonight is not about golf, right? Even though we're talking about golf and golf psychology, it's about life. And so I know a lot of us on the webinar tonight are parents, right? And we're also there's a lot of players. But all the stuff we're talking about tonight can apply to the classroom, can apply to the business arena. If it's a true principle of golf psychology, it's a true principle of performance psychology. And that's really my philosophy is performance psychology applies to golf, but it can apply to tennis. It can apply to the classroom. And so you'll see that how I speak and how I apply the techniques is not just about golf, it's about life. And so that when you get squeezed, whether it's in the classroom, on the golf course, or in the business arena, you can raise your game under pressure.
Yeah, yeah, we've all certainly felt that, and I want to touch on that. I want to talk about anxiety and being squeezed. Obviously, we've all felt it on the golf course and in other areas of our lives. On the course, we're getting ready to hit a big shot, and our hands are sweaty, our heart rate's up, and we're feeling the pressure a little bit. So, let's talk a little bit about that and what really causes that anxiety, and more importantly, how do we overcome that?
Well, the underlying cause of anxiety is fear, right? That causes all our anxiety. Fear of not living up to the expectations of our parents, fear of not performing the way we want to, fear of letting our friends down. So that fear in itself creates a lot of anxiety, but it stems from the fight or flight response because 40,000 years ago, when we were hunters and gatherers, we weren't afraid of not playing our best golf. We were afraid of dying, and that carries over to the golf course. And so we have a fear now of failure, a fear of not living up to expectations, and that fear creates this fight or flight response. And it comes out two ways. One is we call it somatic anxiety, which is the butterflies. My ears get all tingly, and my eyes go like this when I'm anxious. And so that's how it comes out in a lot of cases. And then what happens is our muscles can tighten up. And so when our muscles tighten up, we might not release the club and then we hit it right. The other way anxiety comes out is this self-doubt and maybe negative thinking. And we call that cognitive anxiety. So there's really two ways anxiety hits us. It's kind of with the heart and the head. And so when you work with anxiety and you have someone who has a lot of anxiety, you have to deal with both the heart and the head. Now, I'll talk about that, but I also want to caveat that with that anxiety is not always bad. Anxiety can make us think better. It can make us play better, feel better. And so I think the first step is when you have a child or you, or as a parent or, a player, when it's overwhelming and it makes you play bad, that's when you have to deal with it. And there's two things I like to talk about, and there's just so many ways to deal with anxiety. But the first way, and I think it's one of the fundamental principles of golf psychology, and all the greats do it. It's called meditation. I mean, I remember Kobe Bryant talking about he meditates every day, and it's not about just golf. All the great athletes do it. And it's just simple. You just close your eyes at night and you focus on your breathing and you go from your toes, you relax your toes, you relax your calves, you go all the way to the top of your shoulders to your head, and you just focus on your breathing. And then all of a sudden, you do that for like 3 or 4 minutes, and maybe you say a word like calm. Every time you breathe out in your mind, you say calm. Now that word gets associated with that calm state, and you can do a lot of things with that. On the first tee, when you get those first tee jitters, like we all do, you can do your breathing with your pre-shot routine, say your word calm, and you will get a lot calmer if you practice it at home. See, that's the thing about golf psychology. A lot of the stuff that we talk about is off the golf course. You know, everyone thinks, oh, you got to do all this stuff on the golf course. No, no, no. You work on it off the golf course. Some of it's on the golf course, but you bring it onto the golf course. And then the other aspect that's real important is reframing. You know, when you have this fear of not playing your best, maybe you have to just say, you know, I'm gonna focus on one shot at a time, and whatever score I shoot, that's okay, as long as I'm just trying my best. See, now you're reframing those thoughts, and that's a really good way to do it. And then it changes that thinking. Or maybe you can say, you know, maybe your thoughts are, I got to be perfect in every shot. And I know Bob Rattel, you wrote this book a long time ago that was Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. And he's talking about this principle is that you can't be perfect. No one's perfect. I mean, I remember Ben Hogan would say, I could only hit 5 really great shots around. And he's Ben Hogan. So you got to get over that thought of being perfect. And that could be a reframing. And instead of thinking about being perfect, just hitting your best shot, the best to your ability. And that's called reframing. And that's a great way to reduce that anxiety as well.
Very good. Very good. So reframing, possibly some meditation. I mean, these are things that we can do off the golf course as well. For kids that are out there, you know, overcoming anxiety can be a real thing for them out there. You know, we've talked to a lot of parents and a lot of kids about that, and it's difficult for them to overcome these things. Aside from reframing or you know, maybe doing some meditation, is there any other, you know, practical things that kids can implement when they're young on the golf course that maybe brings them to a center point or helps remind them, you know, what perspective they need to be in to perform well?
Well, there's just so many ways, but I also want to point out that, like you mentioned, I think anxiety can become a habit. And when you do the meditation or framing, not only can it help them with the golf course, but if they have let's say a test anxiety issue, that's become a habit, right? So what we're talking about here is not just about golf anxiety; it could be with related to test anxiety. So the stuff you do with golf anxiety could help your scores in the classroom. But I think a really good strategy is when you're practicing, when you put a lot of pressure on yourself when you're practicing, that
Mhm.
helps your game transfer to the golf course. You know, a lot of times when we're
Yeah.
practicing, there's no pressure. And so it's almost like it's one animal. And then you get to the golf course and you're playing in a tournament, it's a totally different animal. And so you can never get them totally the same, but the closer you get them, the greater the transfer. And so when I work with junior golfers, one of the things I always do, and I really emphasize this, is when you're practicing, yeah, you can work on mastery stuff and the stuff your teacher is talking about, but at least a third of the time when you practice, put a lot of pressure on yourself. So like you're hitting your driver, make the you know, instead of the huge driving range, make it like 5 yards, and you play with your buddy and you say, okay, let's play out of 10 shots. Who can hit the fairway out of 10? And we'll play for a Coke or whatever you want to play for. Then it's pressure. And that pressure then transfers to the competition. So I think that's just a great strategy too, as well. Put pressure on yourself in practice.
It sounds like it can almost work the other way as well. Anxiety can actually help your performance. Is there a time when you see that as well? And when do you typically see it when anxiety can actually improve your performance?
Well, I also want to tell you a myth, and that is all the top pros are anxious, right? It's just that they're not super anxious because when they're anxious, I remember Jack Nicklaus saying this, if I'm not anxious, I'm dead, right? Because when something's important to you, you're going to be anxious. It's just that when it's not overwhelming. And I remember working with Brant Snedeker, and he would tell me, I when he missed the green, he would say, I love getting up and down because he embraced the pressure. What I call it, he turned pressure into pleasure. And that's what you have to do. It's kind of reframing, like we talked about. It's like, I really enjoy the competition. I love the butterflies. I love that feeling. You got to thrive in that feeling. And the great ones do that. They love that feeling. They want to take the last shot in basketball. They want to make that 10-footer to win the tournament. They thrive in it. And you got to embrace the pressure. And I think that's really, really important because there's always going to be pressure. You can either run from it or you can embrace it. And when you embrace it, that's how you raise your game and that's how you put in the right juice. So when you get squeezed, you can play your best.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Before I get to my next question, Dr. Greg, I want to stop just for a second. I'm sure that there are some parents that have some questions for you. We can put those questions in the chat, if that's the easiest way, or you can turn on their mics if they want to ask the question. What would you prefer?
I think the chat box is the
The chat
best.
box is fine.
Then
Perfect.
then I
So
can just read a few. And what we could do is just say, put them in the, let's move on, but let's say if you have questions, put them in the chat box and we'll come back in a couple minutes.
perfect. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat box. I'll pause for a minute. If you've got questions for Dr. Greg, please. There'll be other opportunities, of course, to do that, but just wanted to give everybody a chance to maybe ask some questions.
Why don't we just move on to another topic and then we'll just come back to the
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. If there's some questions that are pressing that you'd like to get to, Dr. Greg, please, we
Yeah.
can certainly stop. But we were talking about the pros just a minute ago, and so I watch a fair amount of golf on TV, and I'm always watching players. When I have the opportunity to see who in big moments, who looks nervous, and who has maybe a history of cracking under pressure. Obviously there's players like Tiger and Scotty Scheffler, and they seem to excel under pressure. But maybe talk a little bit about why some of the pros out there look nervous, and maybe even choke in certain circumstances, while others just seem to embrace that pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone chokes, right? Scotty chokes and Tiger will choke. And it's a human, frailty. It's okay to choke. I mean, we're human, right? But like you mentioned, in a lot of cases, Scotty, Scheffler, and Tiger, they know how to raise their game under pressure. But I always love how they act like they're so confident. And there's a theory called self-perception theory, and it basically says this: our action influences our emotions. So if you act nervous, you're going to feel nervous. If you act confident, you're going to feel confident. And I think that's a really good point with junior golfers, because when they miss a putt, they're going to slouch their shoulders and now they're going to lose their confidence. Or maybe they're going to walk fast and talk fast, and that's going to make them feel even more nervous. And so, really, our actions are very important to how we're feeling and thinking. And the great ones, like you said, Scotty Scheffler really never looks like he's nervous. Tiger always looks like he's enjoying the pressure. And it's
Yeah.
just really interesting how that works. You look at Michael Jordan, I mean, he was like, he was in his moment. It was the joy state for him to be under intense pressure. And that's how Tiger is. And I'm not saying your children should be like Tiger in the sense that, because Tiger's unique, but the more we look at greats and look at what they do, that's how we can help our young athletes to move in that direction. And it's really about, you said, actions. The ones that don't look nervous, they might be a little nervous, but it helps them to be less nervous. As soon as you act nervous, you're going to feel more nervous.
Very true. Very true. A couple questions coming in. Blake asks a really good question here, Dr. Greg. Do you believe in the importance of a pre-shot routine under pressure, and how should junior golfers develop one?
I mean, that's kind of the essence of golf psychology, if you think about it. Most people think a pre-shot routine is your behaviors of what you do before the shot, which is partially true. But to me, the great pre-shot routines is like putting a bubble around you, and so the pressure bounces right off. And I think a great pre-shot routine has what I call the 3 R's. It helps you stay relaxed. So behind the ball, you breathe out. You might say your trigger word because you've been working on your meditation at home. When you get over the ball, you're in the reactive mind. So you're not thinking about your swing. You're just thinking about the target. And rhythmical. That's really important. I think if your pre-shot routine is rhythmical, like the way you walk into your shot, your waggles, how you look down the fairway, it creates a rhythm in your swing. If you look fast, you walk fast, you're going to have a fast swing. So your pre-shot routine it could be thinking, like you could say, you start your routine, you shrug your shoulders, which I think is good because maybe you're carrying your bag, and so you get the tension out of your shoulders. You breathe out, you say, down the middle, and you see the ball go there. You walk in your shot, and you're just, you look once, look twice. Now you're just reacting, and you go. And I think what that does is it puts you in a bubble-like state. And what's really interesting about the pre-shot routine, going back to Brad Snedeker, Golf Channel did a study, and they said when he took out the club out of his bag, by the time he hit it, it was always 13 seconds, always. And I think that's real important. I think your pre-shot routine should be very consistent in what you do and your time, because if you change it up, if it expands or shortens, it tells your body there's something different going on. But if it's consistent, and it's consistent when you're playing, goofing around with your friends and you're playing in fun stuff, and you keep that consistency to competition, more likely your swing's going to transfer to competition. So you have to have a consistent pre-shot routine that's rhythmical, that promotes a reactive mind and promotes relaxation, and that creates that bubble to prevent the pressure from entering, for you to get too squeezed under pressure.
Sure. Great stuff. I did not know that about Snedeker. So what about, we've got a couple questions about, playing poorly, or you're in the midst of a bad round. Terry and Colin asked the question, if you're playing bad in a round, how do you turn it around? How to think and what to do to have a better nine? So you go out and you just can't find it on the front nine, but what's that switch that we can hit to turn things around?
Of course, there's a lot of answers with that. But what's always funny is, you have a bad nine, and then you start 10, and all of a sudden it's like a new nine. Well, why is that? It's kind of like a switch in your mind. Like, it's a new nine, it's a new score. You can actually do that. I think you do it best when you let go of outcome, when you let go of score. Why do people have bad rounds and, they go into like a downward spiral? Well, a lot of times is because it's all about score with them. So now they have a bad hole and they go down, they have another bad hole and they think about it more and they go back, and it hits this downward spiral. If you can let go of outcome, you get more of an even keel with your thoughts and emotions. And that's really hard to do, really hard to do. I think the best strategy, and this is what I tell, I think, a lot of Hurricane Tour junior members are, Hurricane Junior Tour members are really good, right? And they get on the hole, and most of the time they can birdie every hole. They're that good, right? Well, that's your goal. You birdie every hole. And then when that hole's done, you move to the next hole. Your goal is to birdie every hole. If you're at a different level, let's say your goal is to par it or bogey it. But when that hole's done, you let go of the score, and that's your focus every hole. And now you're keeping more of an even keel with your emotions. It's really hard. I know score is very important to everybody, but it's almost like when you listen to people in the zone, they don't know what score they're shooting, because that's not what it's about. It's in that moment. And what's the moment about? It's not about outcome. It's about that hole and hitting that shot, one shot at a time. It's very cliche, but it's really important. I remember Tiger Woods, 2000, playing the US Open, Pebble Beach, and he played the last hole, 72 holes. He didn't even know who's on the 72nd hole because he was so in the moment. And that's what the zone's all about. And of course, he won that tournament by like 15 strokes. But the idea is that when you let go of the score, and that's what you have to do at practice. You can't just take that to competition, right? When you're out there with your buddies, you got to practice doing that and not thinking about score, and writing 4 and 3 and 5, but not thinking I'm 3 over, I'm 7 over, I'm 2 under, whatever it is. Because if you're 3 under, you're going to be nervous. If you're 5 over, you're going to be upset. And so the idea is that score makes your emotions fluctuate. When you let go of that score and focus on that one hole, and that's your whole universe is that hole, you can keep more of your emotions in check.
Yeah, you hear pros talk about that, being in the zone, and the other thing they talk about is I think what you're getting at, Dr. Greg, and that is staying in the moment, playing one hole, one shot, one situation at a time. And obviously for amateur players, and certainly for kids, it's hard to forget a bad shot or a bad hole. But I think that's definitely something that a lot of us parents are thinking about in ways that we can help our kids. How do we get rid of those negative thoughts. I think Ricardo had a question about negative thoughts when hitting a shot, having a bad hole or even after a bad round, how we kind of get rid of those negative thoughts, stay in the moment, move on, and stay positive.
So that's a great question. And having negative thoughts again can be a habit, right? Once you hit one bad shot, another, now you get that negative thought going. One of the best strategies, and I do this with a lot of my players, is you tie a rubber band around your wrist. And every time you have a negative thought, this is during practice, you don't go like this and snap it really hard, but you just snap it and you replace it with a positive. That's called classical conditioning. And it's the way it's the way it works with us. It actually reduces the negative thoughts. And then
Hmm.
when you go to the golf course or the competition, you don't need a rubber band. You can keep it if you want. But the idea is you got to kind of retrain your mind to focus more on the positive. How you do that? You got to diminish the negative thoughts first, and you can do that with the negative, like a rubber band, or kind of tap your thigh every time you have a negative thought and replace it with a positive. Um, and be ready for that. If you're a person that's always negative, be ready that you're going to get more negative under pressure. And so have these positive thoughts ready. So when you're negative, and most important, going back to what we said at the start, if you have a junior golfer you're working with, or your son or daughter's a junior golfer and they're really negative, guess what? They're going to be really negative in the classroom too, probably. So it's really good to work on this, and it'll help across the board. Because negative, I think people, it's called the negativity bias. It's so much easier to be negative than positive, right? There's so much bad stuff that comes out if you really, if you look at it that way. On the golf course, you get a bad break, goes in a divot. There's a lot of bad stuff that can happen to you. There's a lot of good stuff too, but there's a lot of bad stuff. And if you have a negativity bias, it's always easier to be negative than positive. And I think you got to flip the switch. Now, just because you're positive doesn't mean you're always going to have a good round, but I think it increases the probability when you're positive have a better round. Then I think when you're negative, you're increasing the probability of having a bad round. It doesn't mean you're always going to have a
Sure.
bad round, but I think you're increasing the probability.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know there's a lot of us parents on in this conversation right now where we've been talking a lot about the junior golfers themselves and what kinds of tools we can give them. Well, mom and dad are watching their child play as well, and it's not always easy for a parent. And so I know that there's a lot of parents on this conversation that are asking themselves about, hey, how do we improve, when we're watching our children play and they hit a bad shot? How do parents deal with those ebbs and flows during the round and the ups and the downs and great shots, bad shots? How do parents handle it so that they're not passing that negativity on to their kids?
I think parents always want to give advice, and that's kind of their job, right? I think the first thing is never do it on the drive home, right? Um, if they have a bad round or even a good round, you just keep it light, and if they have a bad round, maybe in the evening when the emotions you know, have mellowed, that's
Settled.
when you
Yeah.
can, like, what I call fail forward. You could ask your son or daughter, what do you think are the three things you did wrong out there? And then they might say, you know, I didn't really think through that shot. I didn't really appreciate how strong the wind was. I didn't appreciate the lie. I was paying too much attention to my playing partner, whatever it was, whatever it is. And then say, okay, what can we learn from that? And that's called failing forward. And then what happens is you embrace failure, because failure is not a negative. We learn from failure. The failure can allow us to move forward much more sometimes than success. But I think what you want to do is you create this mindset that of failing forward. So at the evening, and even if it's a good round, right? You should do it with a good round. Okay, John, what do you think? What are the three mistakes you made? Okay, what can we learn from that? What are the three good things you did? How can we learn from that? And then they're getting a mindset of learning from that round every time, and that's how they keep on getting better.
So would you say then that, more of a focus on the process and less about the outcome?
Well, again, the outcome's important, right? You can't, I mean, everyone plays golf for the score, and so I never want to diminish the importance of the outcome. I think when the round's over, it's more important to think about the outcome, of course. But during the round, that's when I'm saying, the emotions can make you go up and
Sure.
down with thinking outcome. But I think it just goes back to expectations. And if they expect to shoot it an 80 and they shot a 90, they're going to be very upset, right? Um, and of course, the most important thing a parent can do is just love their child regardless of how they play, which is really important. But I think the goal is, if they always get this growth mindset, we call it growth mindset or learning mindset, even if they shot a 90, you got to emphasize how important that was to learn from. It's not a bad event, it's a learning event. The old saying is, you either win or you learn, right? And the idea is, if you're always creating a growth mindset with your child, in the sense that they're always learning from everything, then they're going to embrace playing bad. They're going to embrace failure, and that's really important. And that's one of your goals as a parent, a golf parent, is it's okay to talk about score and stuff, because that's real important to them. But it's more important to talk about what we learn from every tournament. And I think that's a really good goal as a parent.
What do you do when you have a junior golfer? That is a good question that just came across. But what do we do as parents when our child, blames a negative situation on certain things, like a bad shot because parents are watching? What do you How do you handle that situation?
Well, I mean, of course, you want to take responsibility and accountability for everything you
Yeah.
do. Um, sometimes that's just a way to blow off steam. I think if it's their kind of, we all have expectations to play well, right? And we all have this pressure cooker. And if we're not playing well, we got to release the pressure. We don't want to throw the club, but maybe their pressure cooker is to blame stuff during the round. And sometimes that works, right? But after the round, you got to take accountability and responsibility and fix it. And I'm not going to say that's a great way to deal with pressure, but it might be their habit of how to deal with pressure. They're blaming a lot of stuff, and it's really interesting to see how players have different pressure cooker releases. Some people get negative, some people maybe even get more positive. Some people, like you said, blame everything. But the ultimate goal is to have a positive, effective habit to deal with the pressure. I think the great ones, when they're playing bad, they're their best friends. They say, okay, Tiger, we're 4 over. We're going to get this to even by what did he say in 1997? He was what, 4 over, right? I think on the front nine. He was talking to himself like, I'm going to still win this tournament. I'm going to get it to even by the end of the day. And of course, I think he shot 70 that day. But the idea is, the great ones are their best friends. They're patting him on the back. They're doing the positive talk. Let's get it going. We're down 5. We're +5 right now at the turn, but we can really get this going. I know, and they're their best friends. And I think that's the effective positive habits that we want to create in our children, and the players need to create in themselves.
Dr. Greg, here's a question from Keith. He's asking, how do you address a junior that gets visibly emotional during tournament play?
Well, again, we talked about, what'd be really good. I think a great strategy is videotape them, because they might not be aware that they're doing it, and they see themselves, oh gosh, am I doing that? Ooh, they might not even know they're doing it. So I think the first step, and that's really a first step to change, is awareness. You have to be aware of your negative thoughts. You have to be aware of how you're acting. And I think they might not be aware of that. And then once they're aware that they're acting like that, then you need to convince them that that is creating issues. And once they're convinced that that's creating issues in their play, then they're going to change. They have to be convinced that that negative behavior is causing problems, because our emotions are dictated by our actions. So I think the first step is awareness, and then make them understand that that is causing problems. And once those two happen, then they're going to change.
Okay. Let me ask you about motivation, because I know some parents here tonight may be concerned that their child has lost motivation, perhaps to practice or to improve their game. What's your advice for what would be your advice for them?
And that's a tough one because they might not tell you why they're not liking it. Maybe it's because they're not playing that, they had an expectation that they were going to get better and better and better, and they're not. Maybe they're not shooting the scores they want. Maybe the teacher, they're getting worse with their scores. Maybe it's not fun. But I think that could be twofold. One is maybe they just need to take a break for a couple weeks or a month. That could be always good. When you're in a slump, one of the best things you can do is take a break. Maybe it's change an instructor. Maybe the instructor is too matter of fact, and you got to get a fun person. Maybe they want more fun. And I think that's real important is to go out there and have fun. It's always about having fun. I remember Patrick Harrington. He's great, man. You need to watch his YouTube stuff because he's amazing. And he said this about parents, and he's really smart. He said, make it fun, always make it fun, and they won't lose the love for the game. Once you take away the fun, then the motivation goes.
Yeah, it's great advice. I've seen it firsthand. Kids that are having fun typically play better. So that's really good advice. We've got a few minutes left. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask Dr. Greg, feel free to add it to the chat. We'll try to get to it. This has been really helpful, Dr. Greg. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I know this is extremely beneficial for everybody. What are some, while we're waiting for maybe a remaining question or two, talk a little bit about some of the resources that might be available for our attendees tonight that they can access to help improve their mental game.
Well, of course, there's a lot of stuff out there. One of the things that I've created is this online golf psychology course at masteringgolfpsychology.com, masteringgolfpsychology.com. And it's an online golf psychology course. It's really set up for juniors. It's got a lot of videos, articles. It has 5 sections, deals with overcoming anxiety, building confidence, motivation, like we talked about, concentration. I know if you're a Hurricane Tour member, you can get it for half price, I think $199, and we'll send out the access code if you're interested. I think that's a really good starter set. And actually, even if you don't buy it, there's a bunch of free articles and videos on there. You should check it out. And I think that's kind of a good start with some, to me, because of course I created it, but and I've worked with a lot of junior golfers. And I think honestly, there's a lot of books out there like Zen Golf and Bob Rotella's books. The only problem with a lot of those books is they kind of tell stories, and you kind of have to figure out the tools. Where this online golf psychology course I created gives you the tools automatically. So that's why I think it's just a really good. It's set up for parents and players the way it is, and it's masteringgolfpsychology.com. I do
Okay,
want to
fantastic.
mention, you got a question? Because I do want to mention something I think is important about emotions and keeping them in check.
Sure.
One thing that I think that's really important that I work with a lot of players, it's called a post-shot routine. And it's really a mechanism to let go of the bad shots. And you can do anything you want. It could be brushing. It could be, I think the best strategy is you hit a bad shot. You got 3 seconds to figure out what you did wrong. Let's say you got quick at the top. Then you image you do the actual, you slow it down at the top. You see the shot go where you want, and you say next shot. And it's a mechanism to kind of let it go. If you don't have a mechanism to let go, it's like a bag of bricks that weighs you down. And I think that's really important for junior golfers is to have some type of mechanism to let go of the bad shots. And so they can move into the next shot with a clear mind. If they don't have some type of mental mechanism, they're coming in with a bag of weighted bricks. And I think that can also hurt them throughout the round.
Okay. Good. Couple other questions that have trickled in. What are ways to also be physically prepared for a round? Any thoughts or tips on that?
Well, of course, we know weightlifting and stretching and all that is important as long as you don't overdo it, right? Making sure you're hydrated. But I also think, it's about awareness. And let's talk about during the round. you need to figure out, your players need to figure out what they need to do during the round to stay mentally focused. Because if they're dehydrated, and they don't have enough potassium, maybe they can't focus. So maybe they have to eat a banana or an orange in the middle of the round. The secret is to figure out what they need to do during the round so they can, it might not just be drinking or a Gatorade. It might be eating a banana or half a sandwich. But maybe they don't want to do that because it upsets their stomach because they're nervous. Again, it's all about that specific person. You know, when you talk about the mental game and the physical game, everybody's unique. You can't assume the same thoughts and feelings should be for everybody. But the secret is figure out what you do best and what made you play your best, and move in that direction, because everybody's unique. And so you got to figure out your uniqueness and your strengths and move in that direction. And that's how you can achieve your potential.
Okay, good, good. Again, on the emotional side, what if it's very difficult for a junior golfer to control their outside emotions? Almost impossible, in fact. Any tips for parents in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And going back, I think you know, if it's like a 360 approach. They can't, you know, if in most cases, if it's hard for them to control emotions on the golf course, it's hard for them to control their emotions off the golf course. So you kind of have to work all of it. You know, if they're getting mad and upset really easily off the golf course, we got to work on that too, because that will carry over onto the golf course. And of course, you know, emotions are hard, right? Especially at a young age. It's hard to control those emotions. And it's like almost like you got to tell yourself before the round, I'm going to control my emotions. And it's almost like at night, you visualize yourself being, you know, even keel. You know, so there's a lot of work you do off the golf course, like we talked about, and set a goal. Set a goal like, you know, when I hit bad shots, I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to do that post shower routine. I'm going to let it. And it's almost like that's your goal. And, you know, it'll work. You know, you'll be able to control your emotions. It might take time, but it's going to take work. And it's if that's your goal and that's an important goal, you'll get there. But it has to be your goal, and it can take, you know, incremental steps. But you'll
Sure.
get there if that's what you really want to do.
So if you're aware it's an issue and it's something that you're willing to work at, then obviously it's something you can overcome.
But I think just reiterating the point is, if they're doing it on the golf course, they're probably doing it off the golf course. So you can't just you can't let them work on the stuff just on the golf course. And again, it's, you know, it's all the 360, you know, if you're working on failing forward, it's about golf, it's about academics, it's about life. When you're working on being positive, it's about academics, to staying positive in the classroom. And so it's a 360 approach that you have to take, because you are the person going on the golf course. You're not a golfer. You're the person going onto the golf course. And if you're negative, you're going to bring that negativity onto the golf course.
Hmm, interesting. This is a good question from Wyatt, and it reminds me of some of the you know the pros and the biggest stars in all of sports talking about their routines practicing and how they approached practice versus the game. You know, you think about Michael Jordan and his approach, but Wyatt asks, should there be a difference in how kids perform and how they approach tournament play versus a practice round?
Well, I would say yes and no. I mean, I think you can't, if you're putting pressure on yourself every time you have a practice round, you're going to burn out, right? Because maybe it's not as fun. I mean, there's got to be some times where you're just goofing around, having fun, playing with your buddies, and there's got to be time where you take it serious and you put a lot of pressure on yourself. And I think, you know, maybe you're playing with, you know, and there might be times, let's say for the week, one time or two times you play a practice round, it's just about fun and getting better. And one time it's about really focusing and pretending it's like competition. Let's say you have a competition in 2 weeks, and then maybe the next week 2 rounds is about competition, one it's about fun, and then the third week it's all, you know, a lot of pressure in the practice round. So you're kind of building to the moment. But if you're always serious in your practice round, I think you're going to burn out. I think there's got to be a lot of fun involved.
I think that's important. I think that's important, especially, with when kids are young. There's a question about do you recommend the book Golf is Not a Game of Perfect?
Well, Bob Rotella is definitely a legend. Um, he's got a lot of books. Again, they're really interesting, don't get me wrong, but I think one of the issues with a lot of these books is they don't have, you're like, well, that's great, but how can I get there? I mean, there's not like like a toolbox that they're saying. And
Got it.
that's why that course that I created is really just a toolbox for you to depend on the person to use.
And tell us one more time, Dr. Greg, how people can uh, get your course. There's a code, right? Hurricane 199, I believe it is,
Yep.
that gets it for half price. Is that correct?
Well, what's interesting is so the PGA of America uses this for continuing education. So they think it's valuable too, and it's the online course is called masteringgolfpsychology.com. So it could be used for teachers, players, parents, and it's got 6 sections like we talked about, a lot of videos, but really a lot of applied exercises that
Okay.
you can directly take. Like it's like it's like the ABCs of the mental game.
Fantastic. I went ahead and put the code in for everybody to copy. Again, that's masteringgolfpsychology.com. Use this code Hurricane 199 and get Dr. Greg's course for half price. Um, Fantastic information. Anything else in closing, Dr. Greg, that you'd like to add?
Yeah. Well, again, it's definitely a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you. And Rex, I appreciate it. And I would just say this. If you're only working on the physical game, it's like playing golf with one hand. You got to work on the mental and emotional game together so you can play with both hands. And that's why it's really important. Now, I know you think it's important. The problem is what to work on. It's finding those tools. But really, you have to emphasize with yourself and with the players, it's not just about the physical part. It's the mental part. And if you want to play your best, and when the squeeze is on, if you want to raise your game, you got to work on the physical and the mental for you to achieve your potential. Because that's the only thing you can ask of yourself is you have this talent, this God-given talent, and you need to achieve your potential with that talent. And if the only way to do that is to work on the physical and the mental emotional together.
Great advice. Dr. Greg, as always, it's awesome to talk to you. I really enjoy our conversations. And thank you for everybody for taking time out of your evenings to be here tonight. Again, I encourage you to look into masteringgolfpsychology.com. Use the code Hurricane199 if you'd like to take advantage of Dr. Greg's information and get it for half price. But thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Dr. Greg, we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you.